All right, 6:33 p.m. on Monday, December 21st. I'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. Minutes are being taken by Gail Hunter. Before we get started, I'm going to take a moment. We're going to have a moment of silence for members of the Sikarsky family. That's a family in town who's had a pretty rough time this past week, to put it mildly. On the 15th, younger Sikarsky, Corey Sikarsky, passed away. And he's the son of Ken Sikarsky, who's a retired sergeant from the police department. This weekend, Ken Sikarsky passed away very unexpectedly. So that family is having a hard time right now. And we're going to have a moment of silence to remember both of them and keep the family in our minds. All right, first item, I'm going to ask if there's any public input on any items that are not on the agenda. If anybody has a brief comment they want to make, I'll give you an opportunity now to do that. Just unmute yourself and identify yourself. All right, so we'll move on to agenda item number 1, which are license renewals. We have a few different categories of license renewals. We have liquor licenses, common victualers licenses, lodging house inn holders, and used car dealer licenses. Now, folks may remember that we waived the fees for 2021 for license fees, but we still have to approve the renewals. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the blocks of licenses and read out the common names for the licenses briefly, and then we can the board can discuss and vote the entire blocks. So under the 2021 liquor license renewals, we have Manchester Fitness Club, Alley's Beach Street Cafe, Antique Table, Foreign Affairs Restaurant, Manchester Yacht Club, Crosby's Market, Harrington's of Manchester, which is now Lawrence R. Chase Corporation, Richdale's, Cala's Restaurant, the Admiral Bailey Post number 113, Essex County Club, Manchester Bath and Tennis Club, this is a seasonal club, Singing Beach Club, Inc., the Mooring Restaurant, Helen's Bottle Shop, LLC, Bravo by the Sea. Those are the liquor license renewals. And then common victualers license applications, we have Foreign Affairs, Allen's Pharmacy, Admiral Bailey Post 113, Alley's Beach Street Cafe, Braga Donuts, Fours, Inc., Captain Dusty's, Cala's, The Mooring, Crosby's Marketplace, Essex County Club, First Parish Church, Cape Ann Restaurant, Laughing Gull Cafe, Manchester Fitness LLC, Manchester Bath and Tennis Club, Manchester Community Center, Bravo by the Sea, Richdale's, Sacred Heart Parish Hall, Singing Beach Club, Antique Table, the Old Corner Inn, and Singing Beach Canteen will, which is Bravo on the Beach, they will renew in the spring, so they're not on the list. And then for miscellaneous license renewals, we have the Old Corner Inn for an inn holder's license, the Essex County Club for a lodging house license, Manchester Auto Body for a used car dealer license, And ordinarily we have Antique Table for an entertainment license, but they're going to, they've declined to renew their license until the COVID restrictions have eased. So we'll see them come back at some point. So those are all the license renewals that we have tonight. Any questions from members of the board?
I have one modification to, you said Harrington's, and just to confirm that it's Harrigan's for the liquor license.
Yeah, I think you're right. I did say Harrington's, and I did not mean to say that. I meant Harrington's.
I kind of figured that was the case.
Yeah.
Just gonna dot those I's and cross the T's.
Why not? Any other members of the board?
Under liquor licenses, Eli, the B&T you called out, but they're not going to be, they're seasonal. They won't be coming before us until April.
You're right, I did. We won't be voting on that one tonight. Other comments? Any questions from the members of the public?
Yeah, sorry, couldn't figure out how to unmute it, Ann. So it appears that the Bath and Tennis is renewing its common victualer's license, but not the liquor license at this time.
Greg?
So yes, that's right. So the liquor license is a seasonal license. The common vic is just a common vic license for the year, regardless of when they open.
Thank you.
All right, you ready to vote? Can I get a motion to approve the 2021 licenses for liquor, common victualers, lodging house inn holders, and used car dealers?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Round,
yes,
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right. Item number 2 on the agenda is an interview for the Bike and Ped Committee with Dana Vermilye. And Dana, if I've mangled your name, correct me. And
It's much better than most people do.
thank you.
It always gets mangled a little.
What's that?
It always gets mangled a little, so you did very well.
Thank you. All right, well, why don't you just take the floor and identify yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and the board will ask you questions as appropriate.
Well, Al told me that some of the things you might be interested in were why I was interested in being on the committee, and something about my volunteer experience in the past. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so I originally moved to the town when I was 15. So my first volunteer experience was actually in the Beverly Hospital. And I also volunteered in the Science Museum. And as time went on, I did tutoring, working in classrooms, volunteering in nursing homes, got older, volunteered in my kids' schools, et cetera, et cetera. You probably, do you want more? I did a lot of work in nonprofits and government organizations, community work, consulting. I worked for Carnegie Corporation for a lot of years with their nonprofits. Am I giving you too much or too little?
No, you're fine.
Fine, okay. Why I want to be on the committee? Well, I went to a couple of the committee meetings and they actually asked me to be on the committee. And I think that biking and walking are public goods. It's good for people. It's, makes people healthier. And it's good for the community. And if people are walking, they're more likely to run into each other, and it builds a better environment than always being in your cars. And it's good for the environment. So the committee is doing some steps towards, a good thing. And I'm happy to make a little contribution. Any questions?
Yep, I'm sure we will. So,
Quite so
So-
arduous a process when they said, would you like to do this? Sure. Go ahead, fire away.
board members, Becky, you go first.
Thank you very much for tossing your bike helmet in the ring.
Well, thank you. Also, too, I want to say thank you to the Board of Selectmen for all the work that you do. I know this interview is like a little tiny nanosecond of all your work. So thank you to all of you for your work. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I just, do you have any time conflicts in terms of the ability to serve on the bike ped committee?
I know, well, you know, I was talking to Terry about it and he said, because I didn't want to take on a commitment that I could not do. And he said that it would be approximately maybe 20 hours a year. And I said, oh, I would have no problem doing that. So I did sort of run it by him because I did want to make sure that I didn't overcommit.
Okay, thank you.
John Round.
Yes, and Dana, thank you very much for volunteering. We're a very lucky community. We have so many people such as yourself.
And you.
Yeah, I noticed as you ran down the list, you've got a lot of people-oriented, nonprofit type of experience, types of things that involve lots of people. Was there anything in particular that drew you to this committee? I don't know how many we've got in town here. We must have 50 committees in town. Many of them are staff, but this one in particular?
Well, I mean, it's sort of, I think the personal and the general oftentimes, you know, they intersect, and I live on School Street, and I actually thought that it would be great if School Street was more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And I did talk to the town about it, and the town said, we'll talk to the bike and ped committee about it. So I did talk to them, and they seem like a good group. And they seem like they're doing interesting things. So that's kind of the sequence of events.
Great, great. So you've got an interest already in terms of what's in the street in front of your house, in fact.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think it's an important street for the town. I mean, it's, you know, some of it is subjective and some of it is, you know, objective.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Ann Harrison.
Thank you for stepping up. Most of the things that you have done as a volunteer that I've heard in your list are relatively non-confrontational. The bike and pedestrian is a little more political. Are you prepared for, because there are things that they would like to do that other people in town think would be inconvenient. So there's going to be not wild controversy, but we're not going to be as everyone thanks you as volunteering at a hospital as a young person. Are you prepared for that?
That's a good point. Could you be a little more explicit?
Every time somebody wants to change an intersection, there's somebody else who thinks that intersection could be changed much better in another direction, and a number of people who think that that intersection is just fine as it is. And I'm not sure that it's going to have a huge effect on you, but you have to have a little thicker skin than say somebody who's volunteering in the PTO.
No, I think that's a good point, and I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and I well, two things. One, I do sort of believe that. I mean, one of the things that I did, you know, as one of my jobs was for a while, I ran a mediation program, and so I do sort of really believe that as much as possible, you should try and find what the underlying needs and concerns of people are, so that it's not so much, well, it's my way or the highway, but if you have a concern that's different from somebody else's concern, is there some way that both people can be made happy? And I do believe that it's worth trying to exert effort into that process. The other thing I also think that is that that's just the way life is. I mean, no matter what you do, you know, oh, I don't know, 40% of the people will dislike you. Look at our current politics today. I mean, my God, if, you know, if any of the people we respect had sort of said, I'm not going to do this. I think it's the right thing, but I'm not going to do this because some people will be unhappy in the short run. Not too much would get done.
Well, I think some mediation experience would be a great thing to bring into the town's list of volunteers. Thank you.
Jeff?
I want to thank you too for stepping forward for this particular committee. And
Uh-oh, I'm getting the feeling this may be,
I have a,
you know, committee. Go ahead.
well, no, I have a particular interest as well. I live on School Street and
Oh, great.
I'm on my bike all the time.
Oh, great.
And it's hazardous duty to go up School Street. So
It's very hazardous.
anything that you can do to improve the biking conditions on School Street would be of great benefit to the town. There is a conflict between bicycles and pedestrians in terms of trail riding, and the availability of trails for bikes is very limited in Manchester. So that may be something that you need to look into a little bit more, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
Great, great. And I'd
But
be happy.
I'm really glad to see you stepping into this committee and this role. And it's always good to have a neighbor on there.
Well, thank you. And I might consult with you about, I a little bit sometimes confused at, you know, at what some of the obstacles are in terms of making School Street more bike. I mean, I know some of what they are, but I'm not clear why they have been quite so insurmountable. And I'd be interested at some point to get your thoughts on ways to overcome the obstacles and how that could possibly be done. I have to say I know some of the committee people on the committee are more sort of diehard bikers in the sense of let's go for a 20-mile ride. I'm more sort of, gee, wouldn't it be great if people could bicycle to the library or bicycle to the restaurant, or sort of bicycling as a way of life. If kids could feel safe bicycling to school, if kids go to jobs, they could bicycle home. So it's more, I don't know that much about trails, but I'm happy to look into that as well.
Okay.
So Dana, you mentioned School Street. Are there other streets in town that you think are doing well, and other streets in town that you think need some improvement?
I do know that Terry asked me to talk to Jennifer, who is doing the Cape Ann. Oh God, I forget what the name of it is. Cape Ann cyclists or something, about doing some work around 127. So I think that's probably one area that there's some interest in. There, I think that, it's nice that they have those, near the school, there's a little bit of notification, share the road. I think it would be good to have much more of that around town, to share the road in places where there can't be bike paths. But I have to say too, that also that although I believe in the goals of it, and I think it's a very good thing, I am not a traffic engineer. So I don't propose to set myself out as, and I would be interested in, if there are any resources available in terms of, who is a traffic engineer, who could sit down and say, okay, if it's a worthwhile goal to do this, what's the best way to implement it? Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Well, any other questions from any other board members? All right, well, in that case, you're our only interviewee tonight. So can anybody on the board want to make a motion here?
I would like to make a motion to approve Dana Vermillier
Perfect. Oh my God.
to, well, let's just hope that's the beginning of perfect for tonight. To the Bike Ped Committee. And how long is this for? Does anybody know the term?
June 2023.
Terry didn't tell me that. How long is it? How long is the term?
It's life without possibility of parole. It's 3 years.
Like it, 3 years, okay.
For a 3-year term. Or as long as we can keep you. Actually, that part doesn't go in.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes,
Mr. Bodnar Turner,
Yes, welcome.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. And thank you for volunteering. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Well, thank you to all of you again for speaking with me tonight and for all your work in general. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank
Dana.
you.
All right, going to move on to the item number 3, which is dredging update and harbor fees. And we have Brian Pike here tonight. And Greg, which of you two wants to tee this up?
I think I can turn it over to Brian pretty quickly. As you know, we completed phase 1 dredging a couple of years ago. A couple, 3 years ago now, I guess, if not more. And so we are on to phase 2, which really focuses on Proctor's Cove and the channel leading out of the harbor. We are in the middle of the permitting process, engineering and permitting. That is a multi-year process, as you might recall from the last time. It was more than just a few. Hopefully it won't be quite as many as last time, but we would anticipate beginning phase 2 dredging perhaps in 2025. And so leading up to that, looking at some financing plans and how to raise some funds for that. We last time around, we used waterway funds in combination with the state grant. We would anticipate another state grant, hopefully to the tune of 50% of the cost of the next round of dredging. We have an estimated cost of roughly 3.4 million for the next phase. So I think with all of that, I'll turn it over to Brian for some more details, and he can walk you through some of the thinking about the fee structure, and we can have discussion from there.
Good evening, everyone. Brian Pike, Manchester Harbor Master for the record. Good to see you all. So I think Greg covered everything, and I'll see you later. So as far as the Greg discussed the state grant, state now will match up to 50% for a total of no more than $2.5 million for a single project. So if this is approximately a $3.5 million project, we're going to have to come up with that other 50%. I'm anticipating that we will have some funds in the waterway fund as we did last time. I'm hoping, expecting around $500,000 when we get to the construction piece of this. An important part of the construction piece is we really do need to decide and let both CLE engineering know what year we want to move forward because of the permits. Some of these permits do expire. The one really important one, our suitability permit for dumping this material offshore, is only good for 3 years. So we don't want to be permitted prematurely and have to go back into the process for re-permitting. So $500,000 in the waterway fund. Then where are we going to come up with the rest? And the HAC, the last couple of meetings, had good discussion and has come up with a recommendation for the Board of Selectmen. There was discussion on whether or not to just raise mooring fees, whether that would be appropriate, or whether or not there should be an annual assessment of all boaters, not just mooring holders, but also boaters at slips, that would go directly into a fund for dredging. And that was the path that they voted on for recommendation. They're recommending a $50 annual fee per vessel to go into a separate fund for dredging. And the second part of the recommendation is that they are asking that the town contribute an equal dollar for dollar amount into that same fund from taxation to contribute toward the dredging.
Okay. Well, were you done? Were you ready for questions there?
I think I'm ready for questions.
Okay. So when we say $50 surcharge, is it fair? Is it accurate to say per mooring holder, or is there a nuance to it?
It's per vessel. So all the mooring holders, all the boaters at slips, whether at Crocker's, Manchester Marine, Inner Harbor Marine, private docks. So anyone who keeps a vessel in the harbor for the season would be charged. And that would get us approximately $40,000 a year.
Okay. Greg, is your this is going to be this is going to be reflected in your budget as well, the $40,000 kick in from the town, or where are we at with that?
So I don't show that yet. So it's not in the preliminary 22 budget. So it's something that if you want to start creating a capital reserve fund for this purpose, we can talk about that as part of the capital budget.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to be discussing budget later on, so maybe it's premature for me to bring it up. But,
May I?
all right. Other board members? Yes, Ann, go ahead.
Yes. Several thoughts. One is it's pretty regressive. Somebody with, a 15-foot outboard is paying the same as somebody with a 50-foot boat flying 12 feet. That doesn't reflect usage. It doesn't reflect value. It's just regressive. Beyond that, I think that somebody with a small boat in Area 7, which is never going to be dredged, is being charged for something that's of value, great value to some people, but no value to them. It just seems like a very sledgehammer sort of solution to a problem that maybe require a little more finesse, especially given the questionable validity of our current mooring fees.
Right, I know there has been some question about whether or not our mooring fees could be used for these
No,
larger
there's some
projects.
question about whether our mooring fees reflect state law.
You're right, that concern has been raised. I think we're in better standing than communities that charge the differential rate for residents and non-residents. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the town council has looked at this and said that we aren't in violation of the state law on the mooring fees being used for dredging and other projects.
Not on their being used for dredging and other projects, but on the basis of the amount that we're charging.
I haven't found anything myself that
Chapter
says,
9110A.
right, it talks about a reasonable amount being charged.
For the management of the not of the use of the harbor, but of the management of the permits.
Is
Okay,
this
so the-
germane to what we're discussing tonight?
I think so.
It
So it
is.
is about the money we collect. Yeah.
So it
And
is a-
also, we're putting in, as I said, a very regressive super fee on something that's already questionable. And I had hoped not to have to do this in public, but here it is.
No, it's fine to have it in the public discussion. It's all part of the
Right.
debate. So the
Yep.
last time we went through this, we had town council look at it. They were comfortable with the use of the fees. Their argument was that you couldn't have any moorings if you didn't have a deep enough harbor. You know, so it's an area of debate, but council felt comfortable with us with the approach we took last time. Whether or not you feel comfortable with, you know, $50 per vessel versus a
A
surcharge.
percentage increase, a percentage of the fee would at least put more of the cost on the people who benefit most.
Right. So that's an option you have.
But was that considered, Bion? A
So,
percentage,
yeah,
10 or
this would-
15% or something?
So there was discussion about whether a flat rate across the board was appropriate. Most people felt like it was similar to the comment I heard most often was it's like having a school system. Some people pay in who have children, some people don't. Some people use parks, some people don't. It's
But that's all based on property value and not, we're going to charge everybody in town $100 this year because Parks and Rec needs the money.
So I would be glad to take this back to the HAC and have them discuss it some more and raise this concern with them and see if they could come up with a,
Would this apply to people in Magnolia?
yes, it would. Yes, it would. The folks in Magnolia now do actually have a path to moorings in the main harbor now, which they never did. That would be a real concern, charging them for that, but they've always been charged the same rate as the boaters in the main harbor. That's never been a different rate for them.
Do people who currently have slips at Manchester Marine actually pay for a waterways or a permit?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is not different from adding this fee to them is not different from charging them for a what is effective mooring fee. It just happens they're not using a block, they're using a dock.
Yeah, we have we don't call it a mooring fee or a slip fee. It's a waterway fee. And it is specifically because we are responsible for the safety of all the boaters, whether they're at a slip or at a mooring or.
Okay.
Okay. Bion, question is the fact that slips are involved, do you have all of the information if you were to consider some sort of a percentage arrangement? Because they're not necessarily paying by the foot, they're paying for a slip. But you need to be able to.
Everybody
capture that
does pay by.
information.
Everybody does pay by the foot, whether they're at a
Okay.
slip or it is.
All right.
There was some discussion about if it were going to be graduated, what would be the different lengths and what would be the rate. But pretty quickly, the group did decide that a flat rate would be the simplest solution. So
I don't know, just whatever your number is, add 10 or 15%, that's pretty easy too.
mhm.
I mean, both of those can be done. A couple of other questions, if I may. What's the target date for this?
For this next construction piece, the discussion is 2025. So about 5 years from now.
Okay, so you're collecting a bunch of money. This would kick in and you've got a few $100,000 here, a couple of hundred that is in the kitty,
Mhm.
and you've got a bond. $1 million bond, okay? And then that's got to be retired over the next 10 years.
Right.
So, and so that's a lot of money that's got to be collected for quite some time. at least 10 years, I think. I mean, you need the money for the budget, and then you need the money to retire the bond.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the grid that you've got in the handout there, that was just, you just started in a random year, 2019, but you can move that around.
Correct.
So, okay. So with the grant that happened, the state grant that happened 3 years ago, did we get 50%?
It was right around 50. We had a $500,000 in the waterway fund, and the state gave us the other $500,000 for that construction piece.
Okay. So when you say 50%, we've got some history to go on.
Yes, we do.
Okay. It wasn't just, well, let's hope.
No, and the state reflected positively on our dredging efforts last time and did encourage us to come and talk to them when it was time to dredge again. So, of course, it could be a different administration by then. You never know, but we did a good job in the state. Appreciated that.
Okay, well, I'm with Ann in that I think it is kind of regressive, and if you were to work some sort of a percentage arrangement, that seems to be a bit more equitable.
Okay.
Becky and Jeff?
I have a question about whether there's any outstanding bonds on the first dredging project.
Or not. We didn't have to take out a bond for that one.
So just using waterway fees.
Waterway fee and the grant.
And the state grant for $500,000.
And yeah. Okay.
Voters
I yield my
did,
time to Ms. Jakes.
Greg, did you have something?
no, just say, comment, voters did approve a $1 million bond the first time around, but we never used it. So we actually still have that permission on the books. But as I say, we did not have to use it because of the funding that the state came through with and the waterway fund.
Eli, if I may, I have a question for Bion. Bion, are you able to tie in day mooring use fees, or is that totally different?
So the town doesn't have we don't have moorings that we rent. The town does not. And we can't rent the private moorings in town. They're not ours, they're all privately owned. And only Manchester Marine and Crocker's Boatyard have the legal federal right through the Army Corps to rent moorings. So we don't have that option.
So even if we were to put rental moorings in somewhere?
We don't have a spot where we can put them. The only possible place they could go in would be Area 7. And that requires getting Army Corps permits because of the eelgrass.
Mm-hmm.
We could try. I'm skeptical that we'd be able to get those.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so what I heard was what sounded like leaning towards asking the HAC to deliver a model wherein it's graduated payment. But I'd like to make the direction, if we're going to do that, I'd like to make the direction clear in the form of a motion. Ann, are you prepared to make a motion here?
Sure. Move that we recommend to the Harbor Advisory Committee that they reconsider the flat fee and look for a way to raise similar funds from a graduated method, perhaps for graduated method.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Sorry for the additional work, Brian, but well, that's the way it goes.
Way it goes. This is why we have this process. And I know the HAC will have no problem discussing it some more.
Yep.
Thank you, Bion. Happy holidays to you.
Same to all of
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bion.
Thanks.
Have a great rest of the week.
You too.
Watch out for the wind
Yeah.
on Friday.
Yep.
Thank God the boats are out.
That's for sure. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, item number 4 is the 40B update, and we actually don't have very much that we need to cover here tonight. We don't have any information back from the consultants yet. There's a question of whether or not we want to discuss any of the environmental impact or other environmental impact conditions from our previous workshop, or if you want to defer that until when we get to the next workshop. We're currently, we're a little bit behind. We're roughly on schedule. We can squeeze in some discussion tonight if we want. Do board members want to discuss this at all tonight, or do they want to wait until the next workshop session? I'll take a straw poll. Ms. Jakes.
I think I'd like to wait until we have a little more info.
Mr. Round. Mr. Round.
I want to see the consultant reports.
Harrison.
We don't have any information, so it'd be nice to get some.
Mr. Bob Turner.
I'd be curious if Chief Cleary has had an opportunity to review some of the information submitted by the town resident concerning fire safety at the site. She had some pretty detailed information.
Mhm.
And
Sure.
whether he's had a chance to look at that and consider it in terms of his knowledge of state regulations.
That's fine. Chief Cleary, I'll give you a moment to do that in just a second. As far as the discussion of environmental impact, I'm in favor of waiting until we get the additional consultant information at our next workshop as well. So,
As am I, Eli.
okay. Now, Chief Cleary, if you could address Mr. Bob Turner's question.
Sure. Is there a particular letter or information you're referring to? Because I've received little bits of information from several people, and some of it was things that I'd previously addressed with the planners and the architects when I sat down with them. So just want to make sure I'm not duplicating and I understand what you're talking about.
The letter that I'm referring to had a number of detailed proposals with references to state fire regulations. Most particularly, whether there needed to be a secondary means of egress for residents if there were a major incident that occurred that would then block up the road with public safety equipment.
I think it's a letter from Ashley Oakes
Yes.
specifically.
I'm not sure I've seen that one, because that,
I'll have to make sure you've received it, Chief. I don't know if that got to you today or not.
yeah, I didn't see anything today. So if that just came out, then I haven't had a chance to review it. And
That's fine. At some point, I'd love to hear your
Sure.
response
Well,
to that.
that one thing that we did discuss the roadway with the designer, and with the 2 lanes and the cutouts, it was in the event that there was a problem in one lane, you could cross over to the other. So even if a car broke down or had an accident, we would still be able to access the building. So I don't know if that's on a similar vein where they have an in road and an out road, but they have cutovers. That was part of the reason they designed it that way. So one vehicle blocking the road you'd leave a second side wide open. And I doubt that we would clog both sides of the entrance and exit roads to the building, if that was the concern.
This letter has a lot of really very specific information on regulations regarding the amount of feet required for turnaround at a dead end and
Yep.
what this plan shows. Anyway, it's a really good letter.
Well,
So,
I look forward to reading it. I mean, those are things I did preliminarily discuss. I gave them our turning radius of our largest apparatus, which they figured into the turnaround that was up by the parking garage. We did look at the width of the roadway and discussed that it would need to be well maintained because any snow banks or whatever would definitely lessen it, but there was enough space for us to get the largest vehicles up there and in place and in front of the building and be able to put out the outriggers and the area ladder. And so I know they came down and measured our trucks as well. So, but I will go back and once I get that, I'll be able to review it more in detail. I'll have something for you, I promise.
good. Maybe we can put this, Eli, on the agenda for next time.
Yeah, I will do that. So yeah, this is a letter that came in on Saturday. We'll get that forwarded
Right.
to you, and I look forward to hearing from you on at our next meeting.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Yes, thanks.
Very welcome.
Happy holidays.
Same to you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. I think that's it for our 40B update. So let's move on to item number 5, which is a COVID-19 update. So first of all, I'd like to just take a moment to actually thank the efforts the Board of Health are putting in. I know that our first round of testing ran into a set of logistical problems and caused a lot of challenges for people, and people were upset with it. However, I think it's important to recognize that the Board of Health is actually trying pretty hard to support the community through this particular time. And I'd like to thank them for their efforts here, and Greg's as well for the efforts that we went through to arrange the testing on relatively short notice in the first place.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Big thanks.
So since the round of testing that we did with Boatport, we have set up testing with Allen's that was limited to 100 people per day that the town would pay for. I believe the first few days filled up fairly rapidly. Greg, are the remaining 2 days or all 5 days completely full at this point?
So they all subscribed, all time slots are taken at this point. So those are 500 tests that have been confirmed.
Mhm.
So this will give us a total of around 730 tests or so that we will have done for residents in a relatively short period of time. That's over 10%, well over 10% of our population. It'd be nice to do better. So anyway, that's where we stand right now. Questions from board members, comments from board members.
I have a
thoughts?
question about the previous testing. And without getting into all the logistical nightmares that happened. Post-testing report of results, I was contacted by a townsperson who was tested and as of Friday had not received any test results. What's the story on turnaround time? And, you know, the whole effectiveness of this is if you get a fairly reasonable turnaround time. And Tuesday to Friday is not, to me, a very reasonable turnaround time. 48 hours is.
There were some problems with the legibility of various emails. And so there were some challenges tracking down people. I believe that's been corrected. There may be a handful still outstanding. It's an advantage of the new system that we've gone to that avoids that kind of problem because people are entering their own emails, typing them into the system. So it's a much more fail-safe approach. But there were some problems with that for the Tuesday testing.
So if there were people who didn't get their results, who should they contact?
So we have a contact up on the website to contact to contact Beauport directly to give their correct email address so that they can get their results.
If I may, Eli?
Yes, go ahead, and then if you want to follow up, Jeff, you can.
Okay.
Do we know in town what the results were? How much work are we going to put the nurse through contact tracing?
Yeah, the number of positives have been pretty low. I don't have an exact number for you, but they have not been inundated with new positive tests.
That's good.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have, oh, I'm sorry. Eli, may I?
Go back to Jeff. He was in the middle of saying something.
Okay.
He keeps taking a breath, but not exuding any vocalization.
Keep trying.
I have a thought about this, that, you know, we contracted with Beauport and they did not seem ready for prime time on this at all. I wonder if we should go back to them and say, hey, we don't feel like we should be paying the amount of money that we contracted for, given the fiasco that occurred. And the fiasco seems to have occurred, at least significantly, in terms of your own organization. And seek a rebate from them of at least some portion of that fee.
Other board members have comments on that?
I think that's a reasonable request.
Ann?
I thought we were paying them per test,
Exactly.
and they managed to do the number of tests that I trust that they're not charging us for any more tests than they actually did.
Right.
They also had expectations that each testing would take a certain amount of time, and it ended up taking a lot longer because there were problems with their computer systems, problems with their runners. Greg had to intervene and say, look, stop putting labels, going back and putting labels on these things. Just put the paper into the test that you take, into the bag with the test that you take, and take that back and you'll have an ID. You know, for Greg to have to intervene to do that, they're not ready for what they were intending to do.
Mhm.
I would agree. We should ask him for something. It was a big inconvenience for everyone who was involved.
It was more than an inconvenience for
Yes.
men. I mean, the police officers having to
Yeah.
get involved. It was.
Well, they had only done this once before. Is that correct, Greg? Did I read that someplace?
How many actually events they had hosted prior to this one? I know
Right.
that
They
they've done
done
them
it.
in Hamilton, but I don't know how many.
Okay. All right. But you know they've done Hamilton, but there might be others. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm happy to have conversation with them and see what we can do for negotiated price.
Mm-hmm.
Greg,
Even
you
if
wanna
it
vote?
doesn't come to,
Greg, you want to vote on that, or are you good with a consensus?
The consensus is fine.
All right. Becky, did you have any other comments?
I do. I'm just curious if we know if we have any more active cases since the 16th. I know we're gonna find out on Wednesday, but have we had a jump at all?
I don't think it's a big jump. We have had additional cases, but I don't have an exact number for you, but I believe it's below 10. At least it was the start of the day. I don't know if it's grown higher.
Okay, thank you.
But Greg, at this point, everybody who was tested on that Tuesday, those 200, they all have their answers excepting those few who might have email issues.
Correct.
Everybody's, and we've got the answer.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or
So-
comments on? Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
So just a quick update. So as probably most of you know, a new stimulus act was approved, or at least is being approved as we speak. I'm not sure exactly the status of it. We anticipate it being approved by the end of today. And it does extend the timeline to expend our CARES Act funding. That's one of the provisions in it. So that's a big help to us. Instead of a deadline of this December 30th, the new deadline will be December 30th, December 31st of 21. So that's a big help for us. And second of all, there are dollars earmarked for not only the vaccination process, but also additional testing. So we don't have details on that yet, but there may be an ability to continue with some subsidized testing in January and February. We'll have to see what the dollars are, and there are some alternative plans that we might be able to pursue. The testing at Allen's has been going very smoothly these last couple of days. It's a vast improvement over what happened last Tuesday, so I'm pleased about that. And there may be some other approaches that we might be able to take as well. The testing arena is changing rapidly. There's a lot of new developments, and so we will continue to monitor that. And with the flexibility of funds and the promise of some additional funds, we may be able to do some more for the community.
So additional funds would then be able to be used for reimbursing expenses already made in January, for example?
So the CARES money could be used for January expenses, yes?
Additional, if there is additional dollars for testing, if we incurred expenses in January, then we could get reimbursed out of the new dollars?
So I believe so, but we don't have details on that yet. So I can't promise it, but that's my understanding. And we haven't actually seen the final legislation in writing yet.
So I guess the question is really the reason I want to ask this is I want to ask the board whether or not we want to be taking into consideration the idea of adding additional free testing for residents in the January timeframe. Or do you want to talk about that a little later?
Oh, if I may, Eli,
Yeah, please go ahead.
what funds do we have left over in the current CARES account that we could use for testing?
Well, I'm still waiting for the FEMA reimbursement numbers, so I can't give you a good answer yet.
But of the stuff that is not FEMA, could we continue testing with that?
Yes, we could. I think going forward, I would recommend that we look at some alternative models, and perhaps it's a cost share rather than 100% subsidy, or that we at least do some, I don't know about means testing, but some way to make sure that those who could benefit most from the subsidized testing, they're the ones we target.
Yeah. Part of the issue is that CARES money can also be used to support the schools, and the schools are going to be laying out a lot of cash over the next several months. Correct?
Correct.
Eli, if I may, regarding more testing, I mean, I think part of trying to get this testing going was for, the numbers going up quickly and concerns with holiday travels, which I think come January, I don't know how much traveling we're going to be seeing. So I wonder if there's some way we could look at what Greg's talking about, being able to focus on people who might need help with the testing more so than just somebody who wants to take a trip down to the Dominican Republic but can afford to pay for their own test.
Yeah. All right. So clearly we're not gonna come up with a complete decision tonight, but it sounds like we'd like to get some options for maybe extending some additional testing, and we'd be supportive of different payment models. Should we aim for our January 4th meeting to hear some additional options? Or is, yeah, I guess, you all right with that time frame, Greg?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right, we'll plan on discussing that on the 4th. The 4th is a relatively short agenda on it so far. It'll be hopefully we're going to keep it to a pretty tight meeting then. Any other comments on COVID-19 tonight? Greg, you good on that topic?
I am, thank you.
All right. Moving on to the item number 6 on the agenda, the welcome committee charter redevelopment. And I'm sorry, I meant to get a little bit more information teed up on this, and I didn't follow through quite as well as I wanted. So this is a very rough discussion. It can be pretty short. Basically, there are some members of the welcoming committee who would like to get moving on some work, but they're lacking a little bit of guidance. Also, I believe some folks from the historic Manchester Historical Museum had an interest in providing some of the welcoming committee support at the very least. And I wanted to discuss this is all part of the business of going through charters and making sure that we're reviewing all the charters for our different committees. And I had in my mind an interest in maybe taking a more integral approach with the welcoming committee to support some of the initiatives that we have, such as community engagement, getting people signed up for notifications, helping them understand what the different town departments can do, and where they go for information and services, and to see to what extent any of that should be integrated with other committees, such as the sustainability committee, they try to do marketing pushes on composting, for example. So I wanted to know, I wanted to take a little bit of time to have a short discussion here with the board about where the board might want to go with this, and we just can keep it relatively free form. So anybody who wants to speak, just speak up.
Eli, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Having heard from a couple of the newer members of the welcoming committee, I think it just speaks to how really important this type of outreach is to a new member. And I think the more information links that we can provide, the better. I don't think somebody needs to be inundated with piles of paper, but definitely, on the new residents website, we've got trash collection, register to vote. It's pretty short, but at least it's a start. But I think that the more links that we can provide new members with, and even links directly to heads of various committees would be helpful.
Other board members?
If I may,
Yep.
perhaps the members of the welcoming committee who would like to see more activities could contact the various other committees that might be interested, the Parks and Rec, and just providing them a list of committees and contacts so that they could perhaps do a little bit of the organization themselves rather than having it be directed.
That's a good point, Anne. I mean, and to that, to what you're speaking about, I think that it's, if we also ask the welcoming committee who they think is best to provide what, connections is best to be provided, they would know better than the rest of us who've been around town for a while.
I think we have a vacuum of leadership on this committee. And Eli, you had mentioned in an email to me that the new members had been trying to contact the chair and they hadn't gotten any response. Some of this goes to the website policy that we talked about of having Manchester website addresses for each committee member of town boards and committees. And so that's a website, that's an email address that the committee member is checking on a regular basis as we check our own Manchester email on a regular basis. I'm concerned about who is active in this committee, and it looks like it's just the people that we recently interviewed. They've got some dynamite ideas, and I would suggest that with a little bit of support, perhaps with Tiffany, getting some time with Tiffany, going to the new residents website, new residents aspect of our website, that leads off with trash collection. While I know that that's important to residents, if we're trying to stimulate an interest in and an understanding of what other resources are available in town, some of that's in there, but it's all buried in text and it's further down the page. And I'm thinking more in terms of having subpages that could be laid out with graphics. So if you're interested in trash collection, there's a trash bucket there and you can see the trash bucket and you can click on that and then get more information about trash collection. Going down the line to Parks and Rec and other things like that. But I think that they need some help. And certainly Tiffany would need to be the guiding light. If you feel, Greg, that she can afford the time to get that together, because I really think we have a weakness in that information, and we're not going to get it with paper passed out at some point when you first move into town. So I think that there can be some work while we look towards having some structural organization in the committee and even more membership. They're still down in terms of overall membership for the full committee. And the charter for this committee has somehow disappeared. In my conversations with Sonia about it and Eli's conversations with Sonia about it, this charter is not around. So that issue needs to be addressed as well.
Eli, if I may, in Greg's notes on this topic, he mentioned the Historical Society had expressed an interest. I happen to sit on that board, and I recall a conversation, it must have been a year ago, where there was some strong interest about getting involved with the welcoming committee and contributing to in some way. And if we've got a vacuum in leadership here, I do know that the Historical Society certainly has a lot of strong leaders on its board, people that are kind of take charge and do things. And I don't know if anyone on the welcoming committee has spoken with anybody in the Historical Society. Do you know, Greg, or is that just something that you have heard?
I'm not aware that they have.
Okay. Well, they had some ideas. I can't remember. It was a year ago, but they had some ideas about dealing with that. They were aware that it was kind of a committee that was fairly dormant, and that could perhaps help to light a flame under all of everything that's going on there. I can check with Sue Parker, who heads the Historical Society, and get more information and perhaps facilitate a connection.
So if there's if the committee is really inactive and there's a vacuum of leadership, we should correct that probably by polling the members, finding out who really actually wants to be active, and then replacing members who are essentially inactive with people who will move forward. I guess Sonia can reach out to the committee members and try to get some active communications back from all of them to verify that who's actually going to be active on that committee. And as far as the charter is concerned, from my point of view, what we should do is simply develop a new charter and ratify it at subsequent Board of Selectmen meeting.
Yeah. Half of the spots are vacant in that committee right now, correct?
Yeah.
At least on paper.
Yep.
And if you count, maybe there are a few others that have just been pretty inactive. It's a longer list than that. Okay. I can reach out to find out what the Historic Society's thoughts are on all of this, and I can get in touch with Sonia, and that might be an opportunity to facilitate a conversation.
Is it worth trying to build a charter in advance of that, or should we wait to get a little bit more information?
I think we need to figure out where this is going. Yeah.
All right. Jeff, do you want to contact the committee members and engage with them a little bit to engage their activity, or should...
Well, I'm happy to do that. And I also think that the issue that we just created a policy around website addresses, because I will go to Sonia to get email contact information, but it's all going to be personal emails.
Yeah.
And the question is, are we assigning for each committee member in a committee a Manchester address?
Right.
This committee has an overall address, but I don't think anybody's checking it.
Yeah. So, we can and we should address that particular topic. And if we address it for one committee, we address it for all of them. And we have a couple, 300 people who would suddenly be injected with email addresses. They move in and out. So those addresses become active and inactive. This is a little bit of a larger discussion. But I'm happy to engage on that. And what I will do is I'll plan on pointing up some of the issues, and we can have a little discussion about it on our January 4th meeting about some
Good.
of the.
I think that's an important aspect as we move forward to implementing that policy and being able to get in touch with people, and holding part of their committee responsibility to checking that email. Because, you know, if there's one person who has access to a committee email, that person, if that person slides back or becomes less active, the committee's unreachable.
All right.
So I will get the information from Sonia on the personal emails for the people that we just appointed and the 2 other members that I see on the list. And try and reach out directly to them and see. And then I think, you know, if some of the older members would participate in helping to produce a charter for the committee, that would be useful as well. I think to have the Board of Selectmen do that without looking at their past experience with how they function is a little bit jumping the gun.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right, January 4th is starting to fill up. I knew it would. That's all right. We have a little window to do some of these things here. We may as well get them done. All right, I think we can move on to the next agenda item if people are okay with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Actually a more productive conversation than I thought it would be. It's fiscal year 22, item number 7, fiscal year 2022 budget discussion. Greg, you're up.
So at your last meeting, presented the preliminary budget to everybody and handed out the notebooks. So I'm looking to see if you had a chance to cruise through it a little bit and flag any particular areas of concern, of interest, what's missing, what additional information you hope to have as you go through the budget in detail. And are there things that are missed here? You know, what areas would you like to flag? That would be helpful to hear those, sooner rather than later. So if you're not ready tonight, then in subsequent meetings. But January, February tend to roll by pretty quickly, and we need to have a final budget approved by the 1st of March. So it's time to roll up the sleeves a bit and dive into the budget.
How about Ann? You can go first.
Obviously, public safety, there are lots of issues there. I think, as you noted, there is a nationwide focus on policing and what we can do to de-escalate situations that come up by changing the attitude from it's a danger to it's a problem. And I know if we have to have extra patrolmen, then we can't also have within this budget access to social services and psychological services. And it would be nice to figure out some way of addressing that issue. And on a very minor note, I'd like to talk at some point about the fees that the ambulance charges.
Anything in particular there? Anything in particular related to the fees and ambulance fees?
Just that, again, nationwide, ambulance fees are one of the sources of unexpected medical bills, that our ambulance charges more than than at least my insurance covers. We have an ambulance that the town pays for. We have people on the ambulance that the town pays for. It would seem that we are short-sighted in charging fees beyond what insurance covers. You know, it's a service. The fire department doesn't charge you $10,000 to put out a fire. Why should the ambulance be different?
Okay. Other board members? Actually, I'll go around. Jeff?
I think that there's a lot of what Anna said is really hard to address in our budget. Aside from the ambulance service, that's a very challenging topic, because you can also have people who use the ambulance service when perhaps it's not necessary. Or repeatedly use it. It'd be good to have some data on that, in terms of repeat use in particular. I don't know whether we can talk about this in outside of an executive session, but there's some $60,000 that may be coming back into the public safety budget. And I would rather not see that moved out of the public safety budget, but to move it into possibly either training or adjunctive services.
Greg, we can do an executive on that on January 4th, right?
You can, yes, we can give an update on that litigation.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, then
good.
I will stop there with my comments on that. The DPW budget, which is one of the other big ones. Are we restoring the position that was taken out this year? The additional position, there was a position that was added and then pulled out.
That was my understanding, Greg.
So what we ended up doing was basically funding half of the two new positions, one in water and one in sewer. And so what the 22 budget does is fund that second half. So we do have the full year of those two temporary additional positions as we transition with some retirements.
But there was
So the retirements are happening at the end of this fiscal year?
No, they'll be happening, one will be happening into next fiscal year. And then the second one, still a little bit up in the air, may spill over into 23.
Okay.
So again, the thought was to bring on a new person each of the divisions in order to basically capture the knowledge of the
Yep.
people who are retiring so that we have a smooth transition there.
Okay. Okay.
And the additional sidewalk person that was on tap.
Right, so that did not materialize this year, nor is it in the proposed budget.
So that means the capital budget will be a little bit higher again.
I'm not sure which position you're referring to either.
Last year, we were talking about the two retiree positions, and we were also talking about adding a additional, essentially a person who could do support work for sidewalks, catch basins, that sort of thing. Am I remembering this incorrectly? I don't.
No, you're correct.
And then we pulled that out in part in March, and then we adjusted the capital budget a little bit, the sidewalks budget, to deal with that effect. Did I remember that correctly as well?
So in the end, though, we did end up reducing the capital for sidewalk just because we were looking for a few more dollars.
Yeah, that was done in, right, that was done in, that was what was done in March. The other one was done in the fall. Yeah. All right, so that one's still not in there. DPW is okay with that?
You know, they would love to have an additional labor in the highway division as well. But you know, they didn't think they could ask for everything. Or at least I beat them up enough so they didn't ask for everything.
What would their preference be first? Was it, because I thought highway was pretty high up there, no pun intended, but
Right, but given the impending retirements in water and sewer, they do prioritize that.
All right, Jeff, any other items?
Well, Greg, is it possible that the position that is being applied to the retirements, if the second retiree is not going out until 23, FY23, that we pick up the highway person this year and pick up the second retiree covering knowledge busting or capturing person in FY23?
Well, so let me confirm those retirement dates. Let me see. I may not be remembering correctly on the sewer. I need to double check that. So that's one, and two, it is coming out of two different fund sources. So the highway is general fund, while sewer is enterprise.
Yeah.
So last year when we discussed that, we were also, I think part of the discussion was, oh, we're also sure these people are retiring, right? Because otherwise we end up carrying extra people for an indeterminate period of time.
Right. So yes, the retirements are definite. I just need to confirm in my mind the timing for the sewer retirement. I'm sorry, the water retirement.
Okay. Who's next? Becky.
I am making my way through things, and I do have notes, but if it's all right, I'd like to just email Greg some of my notes and more like clarifications.
That's
Okay.
fine. John?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm kind of like Becky. This is my first budget cycle. I keep track of so many numbers. You just have to be exposed to them for a while to get used to them and see what the story is. So I've gone through. I mean, my overall reaction is that Greg, you and the Finance Committee have certainly done a magnificent job in trying to make things fit together, especially when the school budget keeps on gobbling up a little bit more than its share, which constantly puts pressure on everything else every year. And but somehow we don't get too far behind. Maybe a little bit, but I will have certainly more comments in the next couple of weeks. Maybe email Greg a couple, but certainly on January 4th have more to say. But I've gone through it a couple of times, but your head gets swimming with numbers when all of them are pretty much new to you for the first time.
Even when they're not new to you for the first time, at least from my
Rediscovery.
perspective.
Yes.
So my only comment that I have right now, Greg, is around my perennial ask about the fees that we're paying to Woodard and Kern. Is that, are we stuck in that particular rut for the time being? Is there, are there any avenues for us to do some sort of shared services with anybody or develop our own support for that? Or is that, should I stop barking up that particular tree right now?
Perhaps for the new members of the board, you might want to explain what you're referring to.
So I'm referring to right now, our water treatment plant is operated by Woodard and Kern, and we pay a pretty significant chunk of money, around $400,000 a year for them to do that. And they're responsible for maintaining the building and basically running or overseeing, at the very least overseeing the water treatment process. This actually is a contract that is difficult for us to kind of escape from if we wanted to, because in order to run a water treatment plant, you have to have an operator's license. And the way you get an operator's license is you apprentice at a company like Woodard and Kern. It's hard to find people who have operator's licenses outside of that. So it's hard to hire somebody into a position like this without just contracting with a company like Woodard and Kern. Makes our options relatively limited, and we end up having to pay a significant amount of money where we might be able to get a savings if we had a shared resource with another community, or if we had our own staff in there who were trained. So every once in a while I knock on this particular door, and here I am again knocking one more time.
So we had the contract expire a few years ago, and we went out to bid. Woodard and Kern was the only firm to submit a bid during that round. We entered into a shorter term contract with them this time around. We either have another year to go on that contract. I'll have to double check that. Might be 2. And so Chuck in DPW has been thinking of some strategies to see how in this next go round there might be a phased handover for the town to perhaps take over the operations of the plant. So that is one avenue to pursue. And then also, of course, going out to bid and see if we can interest other contractors at a minimum to put in a bid as well.
All right, so the dream is alive.
Dream is alive.
It will not affect this budget cycle. However, if the contract is a one-year contract, then it's over the next year that we'll need to be driving the priority on this, because otherwise, if we get to the next budget cycle, it'll be too late for us to move, right?
This is a sewage treatment contract, correct?
No, this is the water, the drinking water.
Okay.
So they do staff the plant. We do not have our own staff at the water plant.
And we had a problem because of that at one point.
There have been concerns. I will give them credit. They have improved because we expressed a lot of concerns with this last contract renewal. So I will give them credit that they have upped their game a bit. But it's Eli's comments still hold. It's a very expensive contract.
Are we still looking at options of tying in for sewer as well with other areas?
All right, so that study is ongoing. I will say that the preliminary numbers are not looking promising in terms of the cost of what it would take to connect to our neighbors to the west.
And what would the cost be to move the current facility should it need to be retreated farther? And I don't mean treat it over again, but move it farther away from the water.
Right. So that's not an inexpensive move either. That's assuming we had a spot for it. You know, you're probably in the $40 million range for a new sewer plant. But numbers were much higher than that to build the necessary pipe work and the improvements if we wanted to hook up with Beverly and the regional system down there.
Wow. That's amazing.
Much higher than
We'll give-
40 million.
Much higher.
That's amazing.
I was kind of blown away. I don't have the full report, and we'll give you a full presentation on that when it's completed. But the short version is it's not looking promising.
Well. All right.
And are
Does
there no
that-
other options, other towns or anything to look at?
Yeah, I mean, our two neighbors, you know, either Gloucester or Beverly. And I think you're going to have very similar cost if going to Gloucester as we're looking at Beverly.
Wow.
If I may, when
Yes,
do we start facing the cost of the decision whether to upgrade the current plant mechanics? Is that this year or next year?
So there'll be some relatively minor upgrades needed over the next 3 years. You know, certainly, you know, the 6 to 10 year range is when we are going to need to put in real money. So we'll have to be looking at ways to, if we're keeping this plant where it is, how do we fortify it and protect it from storms and rising seas?
Thank you.
This is off of DPW topic, but in terms of sharing resources, are we still looking at dispatch?
I think that's something that should be on the table and that we should have a conversation about. So I think, as you know, the center in Middleton has been taken over by the state.
Right.
And they are offering a very attractive deal right now. They are offering to take over dispatching operations for us at no charge. I can't guarantee that that'll be the case, you know, down the road forever, but that is what they are offering right now.
Is there any amount of time?
Can't you get a better deal than that?
Is this a contract that's an annual contract that, I mean, it's sort of like, what did they say, grandfathering your telephone to, you know, you never run out of data, but
Yeah.
if you can get it in writing.
so the way this is arranged, basically, it's actually pretty close to a one-way door. You go through that process and you don't come back. Because each community that has its own dispatch service has a PSAP, which is assigned by the state, it's authorized by the state, apply for it. When you go to someplace like Middleton Dispatch, you essentially give up your PSAP, and the state they want to reduce the number of those. They really don't want to give them back to you. So
what is their motivation, Eli, for reducing? Do we know?
It's been a while since I've been into that depth, but basically they're looking to streamline services and reduce costs overall.
What is a PSAP?
I forget the acronym, but it's basically the electromechanical system which takes 911 calls. It is the center to which, when you dial 911, all your calls are directed to.
So each dispatch center is its own PSAP.
Is it a thing or is it a
Yeah,
license?
it's a little bit of both. It is a thing. There is technology there which is considered the PSAP, and it's authorized by the state, and it's connected up to the telecommunications system, Verizon typically, whoever's your telecommunications provider, and integrated through the entire state 911 system.
Public safety access point.
Thank you.
Couldn't remember what the A was.
I just looked it up. I didn't know that.
So it's not like you're going to get a contract and you have to renew it year over year, really. Once you go to that service, you're there.
And Eli, are we still hearing more positive reports out of Middleton? I mean, one concern originally was that Middleton was having a real hard time dealing with the call flow, and then that the last year or two that's vastly improved. Is that still the case?
I believe so. Greg, what have you heard?
Yeah, I don't have anything to say otherwise. I think they have improved their operations significantly. And they've updated their software and their staffing, et cetera. So, it depends on who you talk to, but I would say the majority of people who are with them are pretty satisfied at this point.
Are any of our neighbors tied in with them at this point? And if so, have they been satisfied or not?
Essex is.
Essex is with them.
But Essex was happy with them from the very beginning because they had no infrastructure for dispatch to speak of. So when they went to Middleton, they got a whole bunch of infrastructure support and software support, and they saved $80,000 per capita because their per capita costs were super high for dispatch. So for them, it was a massive win. Our savings were estimated in the range of $34,000 per capita, but we already have a whole lot of infrastructure related to call recording, records keeping. So the win for us is not quite as clear, but it's still a pretty significant amount of money.
Is there any value to what we have, the infrastructure so far? Is there any that we could make money on that or not really? If we were,
I don't think so, no. Very limited. one of the other advantages that we get from going to Middleton is resolving some of our fire dispatch issues. We still have issues with respect to fire dispatch. When we had the event, we've in theory got some support in to help. Well, the issue for the newer board members is our regular police dispatchers are not fire dispatchers, and fire dispatch is a very different process than doing police dispatching. And when there's an active fire, the people who are handling the fire dispatch, it's important. It's really pretty important for them to be familiar with the protocols for fire dispatch, which may include negotiating or really crossing communications with other communities to increase the presence of other units at a particular fire. And this actually happened when we had the University Avenue fire. And we'd had some plans in place to help with that process. If there was going an event that required some additional dispatch, we had an additional terminal set up so that we could staff it and have a second dispatcher operating. The problem is that we still have is that it takes time for us to get that second dispatcher to arrive. And in the meantime, you can have a working fire, which really requires essentially 2 dispatchers, and we can't quite provide it. So it's an issue for us still. Another thing I was going to point out for newer board members is one of the issues that we have, or one of the items that we have to deal with if we do go to a different dispatch center, is there's a bunch of infrastructure work that we have to do, physical infrastructure work, because there's a time period, if this is going to make financial sense to us, when there may not be people actually at the police station at night, for example. And there's a requirement that people still be able to go there for public safety support. So in order to support that, we need to have a vestibule arrangement where people can go and be safe, and then use a video link to get police officers to respond to speak to a dispatcher, so the police officer come back to the station and provide the support for them. So if we go down this route of switching over dispatch, there is some additional physical infrastructure work that we have to do and pay for. And I think some of that might be grant fundable. I don't know where we stand on this. It's been a few years since we went through this. Greg, what's your current thinking on grant support for that sort of work?
Yeah, I'll have to beef up on that as well, Eli. I know that the county dispatch is offering to support a lot of that. I don't know if they would support 100% the sort of the safe harbor location at the station. I'll have to find out about that.
It's also tied into little aspects, like, for example, you need to be able to have handicapped access to that as well. So we have this notion that we've just done the handicap ramp improvements at the town hall. In order to make that work with the vestibule approach, presumably if we put the vestibule in the front of the police station, we have to do the work to join the police station to the front hall town steps. And that's actually on our list of things to do already. But it all becomes part of this overarching move to dispatch project.
Just, if I may, how does the Middleton dispatch deal with the disparity between police and fire? I mean, do they negotiate with other towns to send in? What happens there? Or do we keep a dispatch for fire separate? Or how does it get switched over?
Yeah, they have fire dispatchers who are particularly trained for fire dispatch, and I don't know if they do both police and fire dispatch, or if they keep them separated. But they do maintain them, and I think they take the call, they find out what the nature is, and then they transfer it to the appropriate dispatcher, who then handles the call. So
How long would it take? I mean, I think what we need is to really look at how long would it take to recoup the infrastructure changes that we would need to make for this to start to benefit the town financially. You know, obviously that involves having contractors' estimates on the infrastructure changes and looking at all that. So, because that would have to be in place before we could join Middleton, correct?
Yep. Well, no, that's not actually true. Some of this, it depends. So the reason you need some of the infrastructure changes is if you expect to have dark hours at the police station. If you choose not to do some of the infrastructure changes instead, that just means that you need to provide some 24-hour staff at the police station regardless. So you can pay for it in operating costs while you're not finished with the infrastructure changes. Is that correct, Greg?
Yes, that's true.
And what kind of personnel would have to be at the station? I mean, what do we currently have?
Right now, you always have a dispatcher there at a minimum.
But
And
but
then-
we but that's it. You don't have a police personnel on? Or we
No, that
don't?
dispatcher can radio in the patrolman out on the street, and they're back at the station, you know, very
Ah,
quickly.
yeah. Okay. Well, it's certainly a valuable asset.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the details here, the history. What's the message for Greg here? And where are we going next? We're just, so far it's just been kind of an information dump, and then we're interested in the idea. Is there a priority that we want to set?
What kind of support do we have from Chief Fitzgerald and Chief Cleary on this?
So the two of them have talked fairly extensively about the dispatch operations, both in-house and Middleton. They're prepared to engage with you on, you know, the pros and cons of a different setup, and can provide a fair amount of information to answer questions, you know, that you've already raised, and that I'm sure you'll have additional ones as you dive into the materials a little more.
I think that's a conversation we should have then.
I definitely think we need to do that.
Mhm.
Perhaps not on the 4th, Eli, but on the 18th.
I was gonna say.
We could always schedule a meeting between now and then. Just
No.
kidding. Just
No.
kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah. So so first of all, let's say this. There's no way that we're going to be in this budget cycle
Correct.
shifting to a new dispatch system. However, if we found that there were some costs, some, you know, engineering costs or other that we wanted to pursue, those might go into this budget cycle. Is that correct?
Mhm.
All right. So January 21? No, wait, I'm sorry,
18, thank you.
19th, I think.
18.
19th.
Whatever one it is, 19. Sound all right?
Sounds good.
Mhm.
It'll be fun. It's always been fun in the past. January 19, dispatch.
Would it make sense to push that out so that beyond the edge of this budget, so we might talk about, for example, extending the ramp so that there's handicapped access to the front of the police station. That could be discussed separate from dispatch, and that is something we might take on this year. But to spend time during the cycle where we're trying to work through the budget, trying to understand the ins and outs of dispatch, knowing that we're not going there this year, it seems like wasting valuable time.
Well, I think if we have if we have a high level discussion of the dispatch and the basic infrastructure requirements, it would inform us about how much engineering we actually need. So for example, if to answer Jeff's question about what's the return on investment, and when we originally talked about this several years ago, we had really, really rough numbers for how much it would cost to create that vestibule. And there were different payment structures for how we were going to deal with it. So if we want to have a coherent discussion in next year's budget cycle, maybe we want to invest a little bit of engineering costs in this year's budget cycle around those basic infrastructure items, without going too much into the details of the real nitty-gritty details of dispatch, but just enough to cover what those infrastructure needs are and what money we might want to outlay this year.
I'm sympathetic with your point, Ann, but I do think that we need to spread the cost for one thing over more than 1 year. If we're not, because we're not in a position to just move this year, and to get as much done in preparation for doing this. And also to really understand the high level numbers as to the efficacy of doing this in terms of the investment itself.
If we haven't decided to do it, then spending money preparing to do it this year just seems peculiar.
That's fair.
The cost of maintaining the current system is prohibitive.
And how long does it
in
take?
In my mind, we're moving in the direction of joining dispatch, unless the chiefs would explain clearly that it doesn't make sense to do that ever. This is a long-term project, and it's been a long-term project. It's been something that's been discussed since long before I came on the board. And I've been aware of those discussions because of my interest in public safety.
I've been aware of them from the finance committee.
Yeah.
Are those costs strictly operational, or are there a lot of capital costs that have to go in to keep the equipment up to date and running, et cetera? Or is it a mix?
So our costs tend to focus on operations. We generally get grant funds for the equipment.
Oh, okay.
Not always, but generally we do.
I just don't know where we are in that cycle in terms of needing to go to the next generation of.
Yeah, we recently went to the next generation.
Okay, all right, so that's invested.
And that was grant funded.
Okay.
How long is the transition if, this to sort of echo Jeff, I mean, this is a can that's been kicked down the road a lot in a long time. So if we were to start looking into it, how long does it take from when you start looking into it to complete the transition?
Setting aside the physical infrastructure side of things, the actual transition to using Middleton Dispatch, given the other changes that we've made recently, could be pretty fast. 3 to 6 months, that sort of time frame, Greg?
Yes.
And what are the initial, sorry, I had to take her toy away. What are the initial cost outlays for us for this?
Do
we know what those are?
We don't have any current numbers on those. Well, Greg, I don't want to overstep on that one.
Well, so again, at this point, Middleton offers to cover the communication link costs. Our cost would focus on the access and the vestibule changeovers.
Mm-hmm.
Replacements of radios.
I think this is just something that has been put off for a long time. And I think we really need to investigate this. And I know we have a whole lot on our plates, but I just think this is something we ought to go ahead and get working on or looking at.
All right, so there's two competing views here about whether or not we should have a presentation on, say, our January 19th meeting from Todd and Jason on this. I'm inclined to go ahead and have a presentation in that time frame, unless is January 19th already going to be heavy, Greg?
Not as I sit here today.
Yeah, well,
But January 4th wasn't going to be heavy either.
Right.
January 4th is still not too bad. Let's tentatively say January 19th. If it starts to fill up, we can push it around on January 4th and make a final decision then. All right.
As long as Becky, following Becky's metaphor, we're not just kicking it down the road further.
I won't let it go very far. Promise.
Thank you, Eli.
Thank you.
All right. Are we good on budget discussion for tonight? We actually ended up talking about a bunch more than I thought we would, but I think it was pretty healthy. All right.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. Consent agenda. Oh dear. So I'm so sorry. I sent out my notes on minutes relatively late. I hope people were able to take a look at them. So on the consent agenda, we have Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from November 12th, 16th, and December 2nd. Approval of the 2021 calendar of holidays. Approval of removal of a saltwater pool siphon pipe from Lobster Cove Beach. A little background on that a few years ago. So the Putnams, George Putnam had a saltwater pool at his property. And for years and years and years, they would get the salt water for it from a pipe that ran down Lobster Cove Beach, which is on town property. And a few years ago, they wanted to bring that back to life, and they came before the board and they got some preliminary approval. and they decided not to do it. Now they're decommissioning that pool, and now they want to go in and simply remove that pipe, and there's no plans to replace it in the future. That's what this line item is. So the Conservation Committee has signed off on it, but because they're going to be operating on town property, they just need us to approve that. And then the last thing is accepting a donation on behalf of the Winter Field Committee in the amount of $10,000 from one of the trustees. So that's the consent agenda. Anybody have any comments, questions? Oh, I had a comment or question on the November 16th minutes. There was something I was not clear on. It was the, my memory actually was failing a little bit on this one topic. When we were doing the tax classification hearing, there was a question that was asked about whether or not the Board of Assessors considers small business exemptions given the difficult past year. That's ascribed to me. For some reason, I thought maybe somebody else had actually asked that question.
It wasn't me.
Well,
Eli,
yep.
I checked that in my notes, and none of the other board members had asked a question. You were the only person who asked the question, and that was the only question asked.
All right, I remember the question. I just got fuzzy on the fact that I asked it. Good enough. Any other board members have any comments or questions on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Roll call vote. Ms. Jakes?
Yes.
Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Round?
Yes.
Mr. Butler Turner?
I haven't reviewed your comments that you sent out this afternoon, but yes.
All right. Mr. Bowling votes yes. And we should write a thank you note to the donor and the Winterfield Committee.
Excuse me.
Bless you. Who typically do you need a volunteer to write that, or is that?
You know what? Usually we get a letter out of, Sonia will generate a letter and then we'll sign it.
Sonia.
Correspondence, a letter from a resident regarding the 40B and town administrator's report.
So very quickly, interviewing some candidates for the town clerk position, and had one the other day and have another one scheduled for tomorrow and possibly a third coming up. And so hoping to move ahead with that. On the compost facility, we haven't talked about that lately, but the engineering details have been finalized and the bid package is ready to go out. And so that's going out the door, I believe, this week. And so we will get bids in towards the end of January, and we'll have a recommendation for you, hopefully early February at the latest. And as part of that, there will be some decisions to be made about the contract that we'll enter into with the vendor for the operations. And we'll tee that up for you over the next couple of meetings that you have.
Greg, is that still, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
is that still Black Earth?
So they are certainly one of the bidders that we hope will respond,
Okay,
but it'll be open to others as well.
thank you.
And how much of the aspects of that are going to fall on annual town meeting?
So we will be seeking some additional dollars for the construction oversight. And we have 110,000 in the capital budget proposed for that.
Okay.
And Some other comments for you to think about in my report to you in terms of some board activities and how to support them. And then finally, Merry Christmas and a happy COVID-free, hopefully New Year eventually to all of you and everyone out there.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, unless there's any comments or other items from other members of the board, I have nothing else tonight.
Nothing except to say Merry Christmas, and I hope everybody who celebrated Hanukkah enjoyed their Hanukkah.
I propose that we don't meet again this year.
Yeah, well,
Second.
I'll third that one.
yeah. Watch, you've done it now.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Absolutely.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, good night, folks. Thanks
Good
very
night.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
And everybody.
Great
Take care.
holidays.
Good night.
Enjoy the holidays. Yes.